Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavati Tamastu Mavid Vishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. Too far, too close?
Do you want the light?
I think I've got enough, actually. I think I'm okay. All right, Atma's not going to be with us tonight. He's not feeling too well, so I'm going to be on my own. And I'm going to start with fanaticism is another name for ignorance. This is the parable that Swami Vivekananda started with when he was giving his speeches at the Parliament of Religions. A frog lived in a well. It lived there for a long time. It was born and brought up there, and it was a small little frog. One day, another frog that had lived in the sea came and fell into that well. The frog of the well asked the newcomer, "Whence are you?" The frog of the sea replied, "I am from the sea." The frog of the well questioned, "The sea? How big is that?" "Oh," the frog of the sea said, "it is very big." The frog of the well stretched its legs and questioned, "Ah, is your sea so big?" The frog of the sea said, "It is much bigger." The frog of the well then took a leap from one side of the well to the other and asked, "Is it as big as this, my well?" "My friend," said the frog of the sea, "how can you compare the sea with your well?" The frog of the well asserted, "No, there can never be anything bigger than my well. Indeed, nothing can be bigger than this. This fellow is a liar. He must be turned out." Such is the case with every narrow-minded man. Sitting in his own little well, he thinks that the whole world is no bigger than his well. Now, when I wrote the Vivekananda Oratorio, I wanted to use some parables, but that one only had 2 characters in it, so I decided to opt for the next one that we're going to read, which is the blind men and the elephant. So I'll read it first, and then we'll listen to the musical version. And this one is headlined, "Partial Knowledge Breeds Narrowness." 4 blind men went out to see an elephant. One touched the leg of the elephant and said, "The elephant is like a pillar." The second touched the trunk and said, "The elephant is like a thick club." The third touched the belly and said, "The elephant is like a big jar." The fourth touched its ear and said, "No, the elephant is like a big willowing basket." Thus they began to dispute hotly among themselves as to the shape of the elephant. A bypasser, seeing them thus quarreling, said, "What is it that you are disputing about?" They told him everything and asked him to arbitrate. The man said, "None of you have seen the elephant. The elephant is not like a pillar. Its legs are like pillars. It is not like a winnowing basket. Its ears are like the winnowing baskets. It is not like a stout club. Its trunk is like a club. The elephant is a combination of all these: legs, ears, belly, trunk, and so on." In the same manner, those who quarrel about the nature of God have each seen only some one aspect of the deity. Now, I elaborated this story quite a bit, and in this particular version, the scenario is that the blind, 4 blind people are, and it's 2 men and 2 women, so I have SATBs, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and they go, they're taken by their activities director, you could say, to the circus where they've got all sorts of animals, and they've agreed to let them feel the animals since they can't see them. And this is really a setup because the trainer wants to teach them this lesson. So it's all set up in advance. All right, let's see, I better mic the...
Circus has arrived in town.
That's the parable of the blind folks and the elephant. In this case, I think you'll find that in seeing God, most all are blind. And we think it's quite orthodox when we put God in our own box. Rather, we should realize that God is infinite in size. So, boy, we're almost out of parables here. All right. No scriptures ever vaunts of his learning. No scripturist ever vaunts of his learning. A learned Brahmana once went to a wise king and said, "I am well versed, O king, in the holy scriptures. I intend to teach you the Bhagavata." The king, who was the wiser of the two, knew well that a man who had really studied the Bhagavata would seek to know his own self rather than to go to a king's court for wealth and honor. So the king replied, "I see, O Brahmana, that you yourself have not mastered that book thoroughly. I promise to make you my tutor, but first learn the scriptures well." The Brahmana went on his way thinking, "How foolish it is of this king to say that I have not mastered the Bhagavata, seeing that I have been reading the book over and over all these years." However, he went through the book carefully once more and appeared again before the king. The king told him the same thing again and sent him away. The Brahmana was sorely vexed, but thought that there must be some meaning in the behavior of the king. He went home, shut himself up in his room, and applied himself more than ever to the study of the book. By and by, hidden meanings began to flash into his mind, and the vanity of running after the bubbles of riches and honors, kings and courts, wealth and fame appeared to his unclouded vision. From that day forward, he gave himself up entirely to attaining perfection by the worship of God, and never thought of returning to the king. A few years later, the king thought of the Brahmana and went to his house to see what he was doing. Seeing him now radiant with divine light and love, he fell upon his knees and said, "I see that you have now realized the true meaning of the scriptures. I am ready to be your disciple, if you will kindly condescend to make me one." So, of course, the old statement, I used to be a teacher. There was a statement that we didn't particularly care for, is that those who can do, those who can't teach. That was an old saying that they used to say. But so if you haven't realized God, then you teach somebody else how to realize God. That's the way they're putting this. And so unfortunately, it's not that easy to realize God. So you get many of us preaching that haven't necessarily fulfilled all those requirements. But it's a good story, and interesting that the king was so wise that he could recognize when one had realized the truth. Unfortunate it is to be seized by a water snake. One day, as I was passing the Panchavati on my way to the pine grove, I heard a bullfrog croaking. I thought it must have been seized by a snake. After some time, as I was coming back, I could still hear its terrified croaking. I looked to see what was the matter and found that a water snake had seized it. The snake could neither swallow it nor give it up. So there was no end to the frog's suffering. I thought that it had been seized by a cobra. I thought that had it been seized by a cobra, it would have been silenced after 3 croaks at the most. As it was only a water snake, both of them had to go through this agony. A man's ego is destroyed after 3 croaks, as it were, if he gets into the clutches of a real teacher. But if the teacher is an unripe one, then both the teacher and the disciple undergo endless suffering. The disciple cannot get rid either of his ego or of the shackles of the world. If a disciple falls into the clutches of an incompetent teacher, he does not attain liberation. And unfortunately, there are many people who think they're great teachers and want to be gurus. There's no lack of people that want to be gurus. It's good disciples that we seem to lack. So, and that's the difficulty, and that's where you get these cults, these cults that get started. Some sort of charismatic figure uses their charisma to gather all sorts of people around them and try to impart certain kinds of wisdom that they think that they have figured out. And they end up with this cult following, and they end up blindly following their cult leader, and it's usually a disaster. Unfortunately, there's some of them that are so bad they end up in suicide, mass suicides and things of that nature, being talked into that there's going to be a spaceship that comes and rescues them all or something of that crazy nature. So one does need to be careful not to be lured into some peculiar group that has these cult-like teachings. So I should have didn't think that we were going to run out of parables quite so soon. So let me play a couple of other parables from music. So I'm going to go get another disc, and we'll play another parable or two. So we'll have a musical session tonight since we're out of parables, and I've forgotten exactly which track this is. I think I'm just going to start at the beginning. The first number is talks about that God is formless and yet with form. It's like water that freezes into ice, and then it has a form, and then it melts and becomes formless again. And then I think the next track is the parable of the chameleon, where the different people come to see this chameleon, and they all come at different times, and so they see a creature that's a different color. And so they get into an argument, very much like the blind folks and the elephant. And so it's the wisdom of the person who lives under the tree and sees the chameleon in all its different forms. So this is very much like Sri Ramakrishna, who saw God in so many different ways that he wasn't confused. But other people might be lucky to get a glimpse of God in one form and think that's the only one. All right, so let's see what we've got here. live performances, so you get a little noise. I have a feeling this is a DVD and not a CD, but let me look, see if it plays. If it plays, then we've got something else here.
It's all from the same
Huh?
Is this all from the same one? The same?
No, three different works, actually. Well, it says they're tracks, so let's see. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. All right, yeah, I had a feeling that was it. All right, so Plan B. I thought since Easter is coming up next week, and so next week is Holy Week, we could read from the teachings of Vivekananda on Christ. He has a whole little section in here on Christ. The soul is strong that has become one with the Lord. None else is strong. In your own Bible, what do you think was the cause of that strength of Jesus of Nazareth, that immense, infinite strength which laughed at traitors and blessed those who were willing to murder him? It was that, quote, I and my Father are one. It was that prayer, Father, just as I am one with you, so make them one with me. So this, of course, is a great message of oneness, which is really the one of the main goals, you could say, of our spiritual life, of our spiritual disciplines, is to find that oneness. And we do it, of course, with all of the different yogas. With karma yoga, we reduce our feelings of self and ego by being unselfish and serving others, and by emphasizing this idea that we are really all one. And so we are really serving the one God, we're serving ourselves when we serve another. And Jnana Yoga just emphasizes that point again, that thou art that and I am Brahman, and so that means we're all one. And so all of us are striving for that oneness. And Vivekananda says in another place that unselfishness is the test of religion, and he who is the most unselfish is the closest to God. All right, the second section is, it is man who said, I and my Father are one, whose power has descended. It is the man who said, I and my Father are one, whose power has descended unto millions. For thousands of years it has worked for good. And we know that that same man, because he was a non-dualist, was merciful to others. To the masses who could not conceive of anything higher than a personal God, he said, pray to your Father in heaven. To others who could grasp a higher idea, he said, I am the vine, and ye are the branches. But to his disciples to whom he revealed himself more fully, he proclaimed the highest truth. I and my Father are one. So there, in a nutshell, you have the three schools of Vedanta. You've got the dualistic school, where there's a separation between you and the Godhead, and you have the qualified non-dualistic school, where you are part of the Godhead, and then you have the Advaita, the non-dualistic school, where you and the highest truth are one. So it's interesting that we have all three of those phrases in the Christian text as well. Part 3, we have read different stories that have been written about him, meaning Jesus. We know the scholars and their writings and the higher criticism. This was a time, it was just beginning where this type of literary criticism, and they'd look at the various parts of the Bible and they'd try to figure out, well, are these words really from the same person and that sort of thing, and they would try to analyze it. What time was it written? How long after Jesus had lived, and so forth? And where did the Gospels come from? Was there a Q Gospel that's behind some of the other Gospels? So higher criticism had become much the vogue right around then. So he says, And we know that all of this has been done by study. We are not here to discuss how much the New Testament is true. We are not here to discuss how much of that life is historical. It does not matter at all whether the New Testament was written within 500 years of his birth, nor does it matter even how much of that life is true. But there is something behind it, something we want to imitate. To tell a lie, you have to imitate a truth, and that truth is a fact. You cannot imitate that which you never perceived. But there must have been a nucleus, a tremendous power that came down, a marvelous manifestation of spiritual power. And of that we are speaking. It stands there. Therefore, we are not afraid of all the criticisms of the scholars. If I, as an Oriental, have to worship Jesus of Nazareth, there is only one way left to me. That is, to worship him as God and nothing else. I went to Occidental College, and it had a requirement to take a course in religion. So I took Bible literature. And the professor had basically studied the Bible to death, I would say. He had, Swami Vivekananda was intimating, you can find all sorts of things wrong with the Bible. And so this professor really didn't have a spiritual belief, which I thought was kind of sad. Here was somebody teaching religion, and he wasn't terribly religious. You can find all sorts of contradictions where it says one thing in one place and another thing in another place. And a lot of times we're not quite sure who they're referring to. There are several places where it refers to a Mary, and we're not quite sure which Mary it is. The stories of the resurrection are different as far as who sees the tomb first and who's there at the tomb and so forth. These things are different. So, but we all know that eyewitnesses that saw something just a couple weeks ago come up with different stories. And they're all eyewitnesses. And of course, judges and juries have to be aware of this, that people aren't always very accurate about what they say. But the Swami Vivekananda hits the nail on the head here. It doesn't really matter. There's a spiritual force here at work, and however it was expressed, the force behind it is what's important. And so we have to keep that in mind. And so the various exercises of, say, a Christian worship services and so forth have a power behind them because there is a spiritual power there before it. So it doesn't, the details really don't matter. Just think of how much inspiration we get from mythological stories that were happenings, and it's not like they actually happened. If you're talking about Shiva or Ganesha or Durga or something, these are mythological stories that are designed to illustrate various concepts that are difficult to grasp. There's a lot of things that are beyond our normal comprehension, so we have to grasp them by telling stories that illustrate the principles. And so we can understand that even though the stories may not have come down as accurately as we think, they still are inspiring because perhaps they've been exaggerated a little bit, or elements have been added to it. You find that in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata too. We don't really know exactly how many of those details are historically accurate. It happened way too long ago for us to have verifying accounts. And so, but they're very inspiring, and they illustrate great spiritual principles. And so it's the same with the life of Jesus. He illustrates great spiritual principles. All right, number 4, the great secret of true success, of true happiness, then, is this. The man who asks for no return, the perfectly unselfish man, is the most successful. It seems to be a paradox. Do we not know that every man who is unselfish in life gets cheated, gets hurt? Apparently, yes. Quote, Christ was unselfish and yet he was crucified, unquote. True, but we know that this unselfishness is the reason, the cause of a great victory, the crowning of millions upon millions of lives with the blessings of true success. And you know, I think also we can imagine scenarios where being unselfish and trying just to be helpful to people is actually better for a business. For example, if you're running a business, if your whole focus is on the bottom line, how much money I can make, then you're not really serving your customers. And eventually, your customers will begin to realize that they're not being served very well, and they'll go somewhere else. But if you make a great effort to figure out exactly what they need, how they can do it for the least possible amount of money and time, then they will refer you to their friends, and your business is going to grow. So businesses really that are successful are going to be the ones that are more focused on how to serve the customer rather than how to successfully or to how to get as much money out of the process as possible. So I think that's an important thing for businesses to remember. And also, I think people get more joy out of helping others as well. If you feel that you're really giving valuable service to your customers, then that's going to bring a great deal of joy to you. My sister had a friend who sold linen in a department store. Seems like kind of an ordinary job, but she loved it, and she loved helping her customers. She'd find out exactly what they were looking for. She'd, get information about their lifestyle and the kinds of things they already had and the kinds of things they were looking for. She really enjoyed helping them, and so. Of course, people would refer them and say, "Oh, there's this great clerk down at the so-and-so store. If you go there, then she'll get great help." So this is really the secret to working successfully and being unselfish, and really, it does, I think, lead to success when done in the right way. All right. Well, that concludes our session for tonight, and we'll see you next Friday, which is Good Friday. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om peace, peace, peace. Yeah. All right. Well.